Sneakers and Cleats, the podcast. Welcome back to the Sneakers and Cleats podcast. It is Thursday, May 2nd. This is episode 97. Don Harris, Chuck Miketinac on tap for you. As always, when it's your first episode of May, you have to get a new sound effect, and that's what I did. I had to put the NSYNC "It's Gonna Be May" in here because one, I learned how to use the board, so that's good.
It's gonna be May or it's gonna be me.
It's gonna be me is the line, but you started out. It
it's
just sounds
gotta
like
be May.
Like it's gonna be May. It just sounds like it's gonna be May, and so that's the hot thing to do on May 1st. But it's May 2nd,
and it
also,
never gets old.
It never gets old. Also, happy birthday to my wife Jordan. I'll sneak that in right now. She is luckily off today. We're gonna go to dinner later, so hopefully she's not listening to this. And we're gonna go to Albi's Vite right down here off. It's off Callahan. It's actually a really good little Italian restaurant, but
very nice.
We were going to do paisanos, but we've been there too many times. Anyway, so we got a lot going on today. Luckily, we have a full house again. Don, Chuck, Luis, and Bob all here, so we can all chime in and do our thing.
Checking in.
Tom Guerrero will check in at some point, I'm sure. Yuli checked in last time, which was nice. But anyway, so the Spurs haven't played in like 3 weeks, yet somehow they're not making headlines, but headlines are being made about them. They're the talk of the town. I don't really understand why, but we'll get Don's take on the headline grabbing that we see national media doing right now. Plus the Cowboys VP of player personnel, Will McClay, basically came out and said Chuck Miketinac was right. So we'll talk about that and give Chuck his flowers here in a little bit. But as always, number 97, we start with the number game.
Doing that.
I always do that. I do it a lot. I don't know why.
Making a lot of noise.
It's like the Cowboys press conferences with Jerry and Steven and McCarthy.
You're right. I do that a lot.
And Will McClay.
Do you want to?
They're talking, and then it's all you hear is pounding on the table.
Do you want to scribble and do doodles like Jerry does?
I kind of like that though. Probably hang on in the Louvre someday.
All right. So number 97. What I came up with was Cameron Hayward, a good one. Leroy Glover. He was a Cowboy from 02 to 05. Geno Atkins, Nick and Joey Bosa, but 97, I think the most important thing is Mr. Timmy D coming to the Spurs. That is what I think of when I think of 97.
Remember it well.
June 5th, 1997. Were you there for that draft?
I was in Charlotte. Yes.
Tell me about that day.
Well, it was 2 days of interviewing lots of people, including Tim's late father. It was in Charlotte, North Carolina, which at the time was not a booming metropolis, so there wasn't a lot to do. Antonio Daniels was there. He went 4th overall. Keith Van Horn went 2nd. And then Antonio became a Spur another year or so later. But I just remember Tim Duncan getting to interview him, 20 minutes, 30 minutes after he was picked. And he looked at us like each television station got a few minutes with him. And he looked at us like we were aliens from outer space. He had absolutely no interest in smiling or doing anything engaging. It was a complete, of course, we found out for the next 20 years that any kind of media for Tim was a huge chore. He wasn't really comfortable.
When they were going through that 20-62 season, did you really think that they were going to end up with the number 1 pick or end up with Tim Duncan and then in turn ending up with 5 championships alongside of him?
No. Championships were the thing I've always said that happened in New York, Chicago, and LA, not here. And then to happen the way they did, it's still kind of shocking that no championships happen here, and then you're lucky if they happen somewhere else.
We knew that he was going to be the number 1 pick. Everybody thought it was going to be the Celtics. Rick Pitino was the coach. They had the best odds. I'll never forget, man. It was a Sunday afternoon. I was doing the Sunday 5, and it was like the biggest shocking thing of all time. We just came out of our chairs and scrambled to go run down Spurs reaction, and Avery and Sean and Pop and everybody else was just as shocked as we were.
Remind me again why the Spurs went 20-62 that season. Wasn't David hurt? Because it was coming off of
everybody was hurt.
It was coming off of a really good year when they won like 56-22 or something like that, and then everyone
David
got
broke
hurt.
his foot in December, 2 days before Christmas. It was out the rest of the year. Then Avery got hurt, Sean got hurt, Vinny got hurt.
And that was right around the time that Pop took over, right? When David got hurt.
David came back the day David early on in the season, right?
Yeah, because the other coach only coached 18 games.
Was that the
That's what
that
that
wasn't the
sounds
same
about right.
year, was it?
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
the same season. Because then Pop went like 17 and 50 or something like that.
Yeah.
But came off out of the booth and onto the
David
sidelines.
came back, but then David got hurt again.
Yes.
That's what happened.
And that's how they ended up 20 and 62, bottomed out, then got Tim, and then went 56
right.
and
And
26
they win,
the next
they
season.
win the lottery,
Literally.
the ping pong ball. And my recollection is they were going to draft Antonio Daniels had the ping pong balls fallen the way they were supposed to.
So if they were like third or fourth or whatever the case may be.
And they ended up getting AD anyway.
Yep.
But Timmy was a no-brainer. And they tanked, man, on purpose. I remember that. I remember talking to a couple of guys.
Tanking before tanking was an actual thing.
That's right. And Dominique Wilkins was on the team, right?
Yeah, I don't remember them tanking. I remember them being at a game that we were doing, and they beat Boston, who was really good that year. But I don't remember them not trying. I think they were so banged up. That was my recollection. That,
Yeah.
you know, if they were tanking, that.
Well,
I'm not saying you're wrong because I just don't remember
different points in the season. I remember late in the season looking at Avery and I said something to him like, I mean, at this point, you know, and he looked at me like, Dad, we're not stupid.
You love that impression's so good.
It really is.
And Sean Elliott, who was hurt too, just could not get over how many shots a game Dominique Wilkins was taking. He called him the Will Rogers of basketball. He never bet a shot he didn't like.
Also happening in 97, Chuck was really happy because the Packers won their Super Bowl, the first one since 1 and 2.
Still kicking myself. I had a chance to go to that Super Bowl, didn't go because I just didn't see them winning, and I didn't want to be there on the field and having to interview Patriots.
35-21. That was January.
We went
26th.
as a station. I did not go.
Really?
Yep.
Wow. 1997.
You know what I remember most about that Super Bowl? After whatever fireworks there was at halftime, the entire second half was played in this fog.
Was the Blues Brothers at halftime.
Was it?
Yeah.
I don't even remember that.
Yeah, Blues Brothers at halftime. That Super Bowl was the last of like the NFC reign. That was 13 straight Super Bowls won by the NFC. And then
because the next year the
Broncos beat the Packers.
Ran out of gas in the fourth quarter. It looked like the team that was the least conditioned in that game.
Yeah, that was the John Elway helicopter game. So basketball, the Jazz fell to the Bulls 4-2. June 28th, 3 days after Tim Duncan was drafted, Mike Tyson bit off Evander Holyfield's ear.
Wow.
That was 27 years ago as well. Tiger Woods also won his first major that year, the 97 Masters. That's how I remember 97 because I love Tiger, and we all know this already.
Did he win by like 20 strokes?
He won. So I'll give you the stats right now. At 21 years old, became the youngest ever to win. Became the first non-white player ever to win the Masters. Vijay Singh then became the second a couple of years later. Also won by the biggest margin in Masters history by 12 strokes.
12.
He set the lowest 4-day score for a Masters at 18 under. The next highest was 6 under in that tournament. Dustin Johnson broke that in 2020. But I digress. He's the best ever. I don't care what anyone says. Anyway. We're going to the Spurs. That's my new transition. I'm just gonna play sound effects and we're gonna go to different subjects. So the Spurs haven't played a game in about 2.5 weeks. They haven't made statements except for them going to Paris. They haven't made any moves, and yet somehow, completely unprompted, pundits from across the country are saying things about the Spurs that they really don't know. You have ESPN insider Brian Windhorst, who's gone on multiple different shows across the ESPN platforms. He's played things like this.
But the future of the NBA resides in San Antonio. If he can stay healthy, Victor Wembanyama has the personality and the game and the ability to draw eyeballs that will change the face and change the balance of power in the league. He is the future. And somebody or two players are going to want to come to San Antonio. To me, if somebody were to hire me to give their opinion, give me their opinion where to go in the NBA, and obviously not, but I will give it for free then. I don't know why you don't want to go to San Antonio. People are talking about the future. What can the Lakers and the Warriors do? Watch out for the Spurs coming from the rear view because the San Antonio Spurs future is very bright.
Don?
Tell us something we don't know. Of course it's Bright. Of course this guy's the league. And all this stuff this week, I think, is Windhorst, Shams, all these guys talking to agents who represent guys that are posturing for their best situation. But that doesn't mean the Spurs want those guys. And that doesn't mean the Spurs will move their timetable. You know, everybody was trying to say that Wemby wants to win now. No, he doesn't. I mean, of course, everybody wants to win now, but he's not planting that like LeBron or maybe Giannis or somebody like that would. So far he's on board with whatever the Spurs plan is and wants to be a part of making that plan. The Spurs have a very interesting situation.
Yeah, I mean, we'll hear from Shams here in a little bit where he does say Wemby wants to win now, but
No,
when
that's not what he said.
To me, it seems like ESPN and all these high-level media platforms, sports media platforms, are just trying to hop on the bandwagon before the bandwagon really takes off next year or the year after.
Create the story.
They're trying to create
it's
the
hype.
narrative.
And they've done this time and time again. It's a slow news day. Let's invent a narrative and let's go all in on it. Of course, you know, who doesn't want to play with a young, blossoming star, right? At the end of the day, if you have the money to pay the guy, or these guys creating a market for themselves potentially, because the Spurs have a ton of cap space. I mean, again, take the bait every single time. Let's see how this all plays out.
It's like the Knicks Sixer series, right? The Knicks win a game. Is Jalen Brunson the greatest Knick of all time? The Knicks lose a game, and the Sixers, should Joel Embiid be the MVP? He's great. Do they lose? Joel Embiid, is he done in Philly? Will Philly blow it up? It's like day after day after day, it changes based on which way the wind's blowing.
It almost seems like they see the writing on the wall, though. Like, obviously, you can see that Victor Wembanyama is an alien. He is the next face of the NBA. If it's not Anthony Edwards, or if it's not, you know, one of the other guys, he's one of those kind of transcendent talents. And so you have a network like ESPN that's coming out and being like, you know, we have to get out ahead of this. We have to start building this hype train. So next year when he's on our airwaves, we can say Brian Windhorst said this.
Remember this too. They're a broadcast partner with the NBA. Of course, they're getting paid to hype the NBA. It's good for their business. So there's a lot here that's right on the surface, right in front of your face. That is not hidden in plain sight.
Yeah, and I think that we would all be stupid. I think, back to your point, like, of course, players are going to want to play with the best players in the world.
Of course.
It's not like we're breaking any new ground here. People are just saying it louder from a louder platform.
I get all these things from, I don't know who these guys are, PR agents or bookies or whatever.
Bookies.
These
too.
emails
Yes.
of odds for this.
Yeah,
odds for LeBron's next team. Odds for
Durant's next team.
Steph Curry's next team. But you know what? It makes no difference if the Spurs don't want to do that. They might. The Spurs might want Chris Paul or LeBron for a one-year stopgap or whatever. I don't know. But they have so many more options. And knowing the Spurs like we do for the last 30 years, they're going to be very methodical on how they do this rebuild. I see it going a lot more like OKC than like Phoenix, where you draft well. They've got those picks coming from Atlanta. Those picks might even be 1, 2, or 3 picks, depending if Atlanta is not very good. You draft well. You see Devin Vassell continue to grow. You get Wemby. You get a Drew Holiday here or there. Like, I'm not saying the Spurs, but like Boston picked up Drew Holiday.
Kristaps.
Yeah. You build it with what you can afford slowly until you have either the cap room or the impetus from Wemby to say, I want that guy.
Let me ask you this, and this is something I really don't know. For all those years, it was RC and Pop building the teams. Now it's Brian Wright. How much of this is Brian Wright's team, or is it Pop and RC still making a lot of those calls?
It's a collaboration. Pop has say, RC has say, Brian Wright is the GM.
So does Brian Wright make, like, is he the one that makes the decision, or is it going to be more RC, like, in some of these things?
Personally, I think, like, when they drafted, let's say, Sohan or Primo or whatever, I think Pop sits in a room, RC sits in a room with them, Peter Holt even, And Brian says, this is what my staff says. This is what we've done. This is what our data says. We've looked at all these games. Blah, blah, blah. We think he's the best guy at that spot when they build their board.
Mhm.
And I think for the most part, Pop and RC go, we trust you. Great pick. Let's do it. Or, yeah, I'd rather go with big because we need a big here. And let's not do that. Let's go with it or wings or whatever. But on a big move like bringing in a Chris Paul or trading for with
DeJounte Murray.
this guy now, the first guy they call is Wemby. And they run it by him too. And I think Pop and RC have a bigger say on a decision like that. But as far as like, you know, we're going to release Doug McDermott, clear this cap space, do this kind of things. I think they let Brian do his job.
So speaking of talent acquisition and whatnot, and you know, the national media doing their thing, Shams Charania also comes out and says some stuff on the Pat McAfee show yesterday, which while it is fodder for the next 6 months, I thought a couple of aspects of it were interesting. Let's play that real quick.
Is that a very real situation that San Antonio is going to be one of the premier spots this offseason for guys to go to? Or what are you hearing around, you know, the Spurs and interest in Wembanyama and Popovich?
Well, there's a ton of interest in a lot of players in every part of the league in terms of playing potentially with Victor Wembanyama. He is a one-of-one player. He already showed in year one. This guy's going to win Rookie of the Year. And he was a finalist for Defensive Player of the Year all in his first season. Next season, All-Star, All-NBA. Those are all things I'm sure that are going to be very, very attainable for Victor Wembanyama. And with the Spurs now, they're going to be in play. They're going to be rumored. They're going to be talked about with legitimately every top-flight point guard that we're going to see potentially on the marketplace. They called last year during this season, expressed interest in DeJounte Murray. So we already know there's at least some level of interest in seeing what type of all-star caliber point guard can they bring in there? And so if we don't know yet, will the Hawks be open? Are they open for business on Trae Young? Does Trae Young, what is his future there? But if a guy like that is available, they're going to express a level of interest. They're going to express a level of interest in any really top-flight guard in the league. And Victor Wembanyama, what he showed this year, he made it clear his timeline to winning starts now.
That's where we kind of addressed that already. The timeline is the word that I think gets everybody. It's like, what is the timeline? When are they going to be good again? Because you saw for so many years in a row, they made the playoffs and they won 50 games every year. So I think those are the expectations of the team now. And now everyone's wondering, okay, when is Wemby and the team going to take that next jump? But putting the winning now thing aside, because I think we have already kind of addressed it, the name floated out there by Shams was DeJounte Murray. And I think that's a really interesting thing because one, there was a little bit of a war of words, like for lack of a better term, right after they traded him. The Spurs traded him away. And also you still have all the assets that you got from that trade. So why would you trade for somebody who you just let go?
Yeah, I don't see it happening for what you just said. I mean, they had him. They got rid of him for a reason. There was the war of words, or at least from DeJounte's side. I mean, again, I get the timeline. Everybody thinks that this guy's Victor's going to be the next player that's, you know, the next great thing, right? So the window for winning is now. Well, they were third from the bottom in the NBA in terms of winner, fourth, whatever the hell it was, right? Are they closer to being a winning team or closer to being what they were at the end of this year? I think closer to winning, I will say, just because of how they finished the end of the season. But I've been talking about this for years.
Like a 500 team.
Yes. These superstar teams, the super friend teams, that doesn't work anymore.
Right.
And it's proven that it doesn't work anymore. So why, if you're looking at that, or all these examples of the Phoenixes of the world, or the Clippers of the world, or name the team, Golden State recently.
They're not going to.
I mean, why would you follow that formula? All you have to do is look right up I-35 and see what OKC is doing. That's the formula. Young,
Minnesota.
unproven players that can play. Minnesota's another great example. Denver's another good example. All these unproven teams, though, that have made that leap here recently are all what I would call superstar-less teams in terms of superstars.
If they called the Hawks about DeJounte, it was because they fleeced them so bad, they probably said, let's see if they'll go for it again. We sold, a $15,000 car for $30,000. Let's see if we can get it back for 15. But they're not going to overpay. Darius Garland's out there, nice piece. I don't know that he's a. I don't think he's a. I don't know if he's a winner, a winning player. But they're not going to do anything to jeopardize the long build by giving up a lot of these picks. You know, if they could get a Darius Garland or somebody like that for Keldon and 1 pick, maybe. But they're not going to mortgage those picks knowing that those picks could be future number 1 pick overalls. So I think, yes, in time, they're going to get somebody really big. But I don't know that it's this offseason.
I think, Chuck, you're making a good point. And you and I talked about it the other day. You see Phoenix, who is dead. They're dead. They can't do anything. They have no second-round picks. They have no first-round picks, and they're strapped into 3 players who are past their prime. Oh, not Devin Booker. 2 players that are past their prime, paying them $50-60 million a year. They're dead. You don't want to do that. That formula doesn't work anymore because it's so cost prohibitive to you in terms of the luxury tax, in terms of the second-tier tax, and you have all these
who you had to give up to get those guys.
Yeah, you have so many different levels of being prohibited from actually building a good team if you do something like that. OKC, they added Rudy Gobert. That was their one big pickup, and look at what he's done for them. Excuse me. Okay. Correct. Minnesota. Denver, they added Aaron Gordon, but the rest of their talent's homegrown. MPJ, Jamal Murray, Nikola Jokic, all of their other talent is homegrown. You add one piece to maybe take you over the top. To your point, when you're adding a Kristaps or a Drew Holiday, their other talent's homegrown, except for Derek White. You see Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, both drafted. Like, you have to build through the draft and then add somebody afterwards. It's not, let's get somebody right now just to take us to a point where then we have to add somebody.
But you have to draft well. And here's where the Spurs are, right? They took Devin Vassell at 12 or 11, and Halliburton went 1 pick later. Mm-hmm. They took Sohan at 9, and Jalen Williams of the Thunder went at 12. So picture these Spurs with Wemby, Halliburton, and Jalen Williams instead of Devin and Sohan. So, yes, you can do it, but you have to draft well. But they have a lot of picks.
You have to draft better. I mean, you're going to hit on Wemby because he's the obvious pick.
Well, no, Wemby, but you have to hit.
You have to draft better.
You have to hit on Halliburton instead of Vassell. You have to hit on Jalen Williams instead of Sohan.
Right. Bob has a couple of viewer questions before we move on from the Spurs.
Yeah, you were talking about timeline. One, DeLuna asks, is there a chance Wemby goes to another team when his rookie contract is over? What percentage do you give it?
Don.
Of course there's a chance, but you have him for 5 years. You have him for 4 plus the team option. So that's way down the road. So, of course, every player, I haven't seen a player in a long time turn down that 5th year option.
They generally don't.
They usually leave after 7 years or after 8 years. So yeah, there's a chance, but I mean that cart is way down the road.
Hey, the other question comes, you were talking about Pop earlier, from Eric Sanchez. Does Becky come back when Pop retires? Do you expect Becky to come back? I
don't know. I don't think she's top 5 on their list. I don't know. Who knows by then? It changes.
Do you think Becky will ever
there was a time where Mike Budd would be the guy, right? But now he's kind of
he's still out there right now.
Yeah. I think Will Hardy in Utah is a really good option.
Do you think that Becky Hammon will ever be an NBA coach?
Sure, I don't see why not.
I mean, she's done a hell of a job in the WNBA, and she did a great job here with the Spurs, so why wouldn't she be?
Yeah.
Bob, any other ones before we move on?
That's good.
All right. All right, let's get to the giving Chuck his praise part of this podcast real quick. So for weeks, Chuck has been saying all along that all in basically means all in on the guys that the Cowboys have right now. So Will McClay has obviously heard that and is listening very feverishly to the Sneakers and Cleats podcast.
Yes.
And has heard Chuck say that.
At least now he has an excuse, right, for why they've done what they've done.
Exactly. So from Michael Gelkin of the Dallas Morning News, Cowboys VP, can you run that real quick for me there, Luis? Thank you. Cowboys VP of Player Personnel, Will McClay, on the need for recent draft picks like nose tackle Mozzie Smith, tight end Luke Schoonmaker, DeMar Van Overshown, Volemi Fehoko to make the jump in 2024. Those guys have made the jump for us to have to make a jump for us to succeed. They've been in the system for a year. Now we've got a little different defensive scheme, and they've been around here. They've been a part of the process. When you draft players, those players don't always immediately step in and fill that role. But when you're drafting a player, you're drafting him for 4 to 5 years. You're drafting them for 4 to 5 years of their contract, and we're trying to get a return on that investment. He goes on to say a couple of other things, but basically, good job.
Thank you.
Good job, Chuck.
Appreciate you.
So,
All in. No one knew what it meant, but Chuck did.
Broken watches right twice a day.
but I mean, I think that's interesting that you've been covering them for a long time, obviously, here in San Antonio, and you see kind of the way they operate. Why is it that they have to rely on these guys, and why is it that that's how you saw the way this is going to play out?
Just again, when you're talking about specifically Jerry Jones, you know, it's sometimes it's what he says, it's sometimes it's what he doesn't say. He's usually very careful about how he presents things, and you know, again, just how the way the offseason was starting to unfold, i.e., they're not signing anybody. It's like, okay, I know exactly what he's talking about here. You know, there's some of these guys like Fehoko, I forgot he was even on the roster. Like how, you know, they drafted the guy in the middle round. So this is a guy that you think can contribute to your football team at some point. At least that was the thought going in. So, you know, add it all up, they've got to take advantage of some of the guys that are under contract, and we'll see how it ends up going. There's a lot of unknowns, though.
You would think guys like Overshown and Mozzie can play.
Well, I mean, and
Yes.
Overshown didn't get a chance to be
Right,
fair.
right,
Overshown
for
tore his ACL, and he didn't
For
get
sure.
a chance to play. But we were all talking about how good he could possibly be
Yeah.
in that middle linebacking role. He might have made an impact last year, but we never got to find out. And then you have guys like, I think he also commented on Trayvon Diggs coming back. Like, you're going to have, that's reinforcements that you didn't have last year. As for whatever we think of Trayvon Diggs, you're still going to have that next year. Hopefully he comes back at 100%. But I think it's a dangerous game, though, when you're relying on a bunch of guys that haven't proven themselves, that you're now relying to take that next jump in order for you to succeed.
And I think Jerry said it best too. They have to embrace their fate at this point. This is the bed that they've made coming exactly to this point in time. So you can either say or feel or react and do nothing, and you end up with a 6-win team, or you can go all in with what they've done to get to this point. And again, there's a lot of moving parts. So if they're going to win 13 games next year, they got to have a lot of guys that are on this roster do extraordinary things.
I think it's hilarious. I think it's really funny that it's almost been like the sky is falling for the Cowboys and like Cowboys fans this offseason, because they haven't really done much. But then you look at some power rankings, and they're still the 4th best team in the NFC. The NFC is a little bit weaker, but still, they're the 3rd, 4th, 5th best team at worst in the NFC. We're speaking like they suck, and they're actually one of the best teams in their conference.
We'll see.
I mean, right now, they were 12-5 last year, so I mean, they're still one of the best teams in the NFC.
They lost a lot of people. They lost Tyron Smith. They lost Tyler Biadasz. They lost 55. They might lose Stephon Gilmore. They've lost a lot of real good playmakers. And the last time I saw them against Green Bay, they don't look very good.
Hey, at least Zeke isn't going to end his career at center with the Cowboys. So at least
Good point.
I think that's the best thing that's happened this offseason, is that we're not going to remember Zeke being a center for his last snap. Being completely trucked.
And shocking nobody that he's not going to be wearing 21 next year.
Yeah. What did you think of that?
You could see it come. You could see that coming too.
Why?
Why would the Cowboys as an organization allow fans to have something that's 2 years old still be relevant today? They're going to sell a boatload of Zeke 15 jerseys. And it makes complete sense from a
Sit
business
down here,
standpoint.
Zeke. Let me tell you something. Certainly, I know you want 21, but I just wrote a check to Dak for $2 million for royalties off his jersey sales. He's one of the tops in the league. Listen, we can sell a lot of 15 jerseys, sir. Don't you think, Zeke? Would you like to make a little more money than that veteran minimum you're getting?
Speaking of Jerry Jones, a lot of people.
That's probably.
That's
He's
actually exactly what it sounded
paraphrasing,
like.
but that's probably how it went down.
That was to be a fly on the wall in the Star that day. Last thing before we get out of here, you said that Jerry typically has a plan, and he doesn't usually just speak off the cuff, or he kind of knows what he's saying. That's why when he spoke about Jonathan Brooks in that meeting after the first day of the draft, and he was just waxing rhapsodic about the best interview ever, people were like, maybe you shouldn't do that, Jerry. I was more like, what's his plan here? Because he typically doesn't just go off and say random crap. Sometimes he reveals his board, but that was an
Right.
accident.
He had Zeke in his back pocket.
Yeah,
and
he
knew
had
it.
everything in his back pocket. So that, I mean, it goes to that point.
Yeah, I mean, you could make the argument that he was baiting somebody to take the running back before they got to where they were because they knew what they were going to take. But I don't know. I mean, we can spitball that all day long. But yeah, it does seem kind of weird that you would be giving, if that was really what was in your heart, why would you give that away in a press conference?
By the way, Jonathan Brooks, pride of Hallettsville, Texas, right down the road.
That's right.
I don't know how you understand where and know where everyone is from. Like, I have no room up here for that.
I don't know where everyone's from.
You seem to know where a lot of people are from, like colleges, hometowns.
Yeah.
Like you've got that stuff memorized.
It's weird.
Bob, a couple questions before we get out of here.
A couple comments from To the Max Guevara. Zeke needs to stop doing the feed me sign and run the ball harder. He falls down after the first hit, then leaves the game instead of staying in the game. You guys got anything to say to that?
He's tired.
Yeah, I mean, that's why they got rid of him.
I mean, the feed me thing is something that I think is never going to go away. That's the best gif that you can actually put on something. Just him eating the cereal really fast. I hope that never goes away. Sorry.
And a personal question for Don from Johnny Garcia. He says, my question is for Don. You spent multiple years at Cowboys training camps. Do you look forward to on escaping the Texas heat for California heat? And how much is it a difference?
Is this BCSO, Johnny?
It's a huge difference.
Hi, Johnny.
Johnny Garcia? Is it the
I think that's BCSO,
okay.
Johnny.
It's awesome. It's a huge difference. It's 70. It's cool. You got to put on a windbreaker when you go out there to Oxnard. I mean, yeah, on the company dime, it's a beautiful thing to be in California.
Well, Zach and David have been doing that the last few years, haven't
Yeah.
they? Zen Chase.
Yeah,
So
yeah. But Oxnard is, yes, you loved escaping the Texas heat.
especially
How
in
is it at training camp? Do you really get time to? Is it a time when you can really interact with players, and do you actually get a better insight into the team?
You get to see guys on the field. It's changed in recent years. The access isn't quite as great as it used to be, but you're not friends with them or anything. But you can walk up to any scrub on the team and stick your microphone and come up with original content. Fun, like you can do a little trivia game, or you have access like that. Except you don't get it with Dak and the
Yeah,
big
that's
boys.
the Cowboys, man. You can do that summer, fall.
Well, Chuck, you also
Spring?
you did a great story with their equipment managers last year. I mean, that was
That's his homeboy.
original content
Yeah.
that you got.
Thank you. Well, I mean, again, if everything worked as well with us as the Cowboys do, this would be a much better place, a much better world.
Jerry's always gotten it.
Thank
They're
you.
very good
Thank
to the
you,
media.
Jerry, from the bottom of my heart.
Well, they even give all the media that goes to training camp, you get a 10-minute sit down with Jerry. I mean, that's what they did last year, at least. I mean, it's
Every year.
giving that kind of access only builds your brand even more. And so that's why I never understand when, not to crap talk the Spurs, but like their access is a little bit more limited.
When
So are the Texans. So is the
Texans,
University of Texas.
There's
You
a
can go
lot.
right-
There's a lot of organizations that don't get it.
It's almost across the board now, but thankfully not the Cowboys.
when they had training camp in San Antonio or anywhere in Texas, Austin, Wichita Falls,
Dallas, the Cowboys.
when it's the same time zone, and we have our 10 o'clock, 10:20 sportscast, they would shut down player meetings at 10:10. They had assignment with their PR staff. Every guy went to a station, all the 4 or 5 stations in Dallas, the San
you can do a
Antonio
live interview.
stations. They would bring them to you. You'd sit in director's chairs live at 10:20 with the Cowboy of your choice for the most part.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Big time names, starters, Nate Newton, Jason Witten, all those kind of
I-
guys.
Mark Tuinay in the back of a live unit, and then cracked me for asking him. I won't get into that. We gotta go.
All right, yeah, we're getting out of here. Anything else, Bob?
That's good.
All
Rest in
good. All
peace.
right.
Rest in peace, Mark Tuinay.
Amen. Good man.
All right. That is it for the Sneakers and Cleats podcast today on May 2nd. Remember to rate, review, download, subscribe, give us a 5-star rating, tell a friend, tell an enemy. We will see you right back here.
Hold
on
on. We have a last minute comment from Yuli.
Okay. Hi,
Yuli
Yuli.
wanted to.
Yuli needs
he's
to find-
congratulating
Yuli.
Don
Get on the
on
clock,
his shout
Yuli.
out by TNT.
Oh, yeah. You did get a shout out by TNT.
Yes, you did.
Listen, I can die now and go to heaven. I'm happy.
Also, happy birthday to my wife. I'll see you in a little bit. Everyone else, have a great weekend, and we'll see you on Monday.